Minasan konnichiwa. Welcome to another session of Have a Cooking Tea with the Society. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I am the Japan America Society of Georgia's Executive Director, and I'm so glad you are all joining in today as we have a very, very special guest. Today we are celebrating Asian American Heritage Month, and as such, we have our guest today from JETRO Atlanta. JETRO, of course, is the Japan External Trade Organization. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest. But before we do that, I am enjoying a nice, cold, hot mug of tea right here, as enjoying some healthy, benefits to tea. But Trevin Dye is our guest today from JETRO Atlanta. Trevin, what are you enjoying today?
I am enjoying a great mug of green tea today, actually with peach infused.
Oh, nice. How fancy, peach infused. So only the best for Trevin. So Trevin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what type of work you do.
Okay, so Trevin Dye, I'm the Assistant Director of Business Development here in Atlanta for JETRO, which is the Japan External Trade Organization. I am from Atlanta, by the way, not many of us. But the Japan External Trade Organization is kind of the investment arm of the Japanese government. So we help companies open offices in Japan, and we also help the Japanese to find business partners when necessary as well. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. And we have a lot of different initiatives to help that happen.
Well, certainly JETRO has been a very important part of the Japanese investment here in the state of Georgia and throughout the U.S., but also helping American companies and other business throughout the world to open up shop and invest in Japan as well. So we certainly commend all the great work you do. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of your initiatives, some specific programs and services that JETRO has for our members looking to maybe invest in Japan, or some of our Japanese companies wanting to come here to the U.S. side?
Sure. So we have many different things, including invitation programs. We offer free office space in Japan for companies that are looking for locations in Japan. All of our services are free, which is very important. We're not a company, we're the government itself. So in that capacity, we're able to help companies circumvent the cost of opening an office by themselves. Outside of the pandemic, we have some initiatives like invitation programs or buyers programs where we send companies to Japan. Just one off the top of my head, I remember Tivana went to Japan on one of our programs to buy green tea for their operations. So that's just one example. In the pandemic, we've been helping Japanese companies a little bit more, especially digitally these days, because we can't physically go to Japan and it's difficult for them to come to the US, in helping them to get their items and their services to the US market. So we've been introducing them via our virtual services and also helping them to establish a physical presence or even expand in the States.
Well, very nice. I know one specific example, without naming too many names, I know one of our members who runs actually a Japanese boutique shop was able to connect with a Japanese artisan group who produces daruma in Japan, and they were able to see your services, get some of the daruma products, the Japanese dolls into their stores, and we're actually going to be doing a workshop on virtually on how daruma dolls are made and kind of do a show a demonstration of how they're painted. So I know you have a lot of different programs and initiatives, and that's one real world, example that they do really work, right? So
yes.
Well, Trevin, how did you first get introduced to Japan? I know, kind of like me, you're an honorary, maybe a Japanese citizen in a way, but you have, I think, extensive with Japanese companies, but also working and teaching in Japan. So tell us a little bit about kind of your connection to Japan.
So I guess my path to Japan is not a straight line. I think most of us who are working in international business seldom move in a straight line. Very early on, and I would go way back to my high school years, I used to be really fascinated with video games, of course, Japanese video games. Street Fighter comes to mind. So as part of my entree to Japan or via video games, I remember many of the characters in the game, of course, were speaking Japanese. Many of them had kanji or Japanese writing on them, and many of us were always curious as to what that meant. So that kind of brought me to be interested in languages. And my parents started me very, very early with languages, even from, I'd say, fourth grade. The school that I went to started languages in fourth grade, starting with German, and then every year was a different language. My parents made sure that I had friends to practice with, that I was well traveled. Um, Around that time, I was also very interested in music, particularly classical music and piano, and I wanted to be an ambassador and a linguist in general. So my parents combined those two interests and sent me to Russia for 6 months when I was in high school. And from there, it was all about languages and culture and building bridges, etc. So fast forward to college, my brother was on the JET program, teaching English in Tochigi in Japan. And I took one semester, I was at Oberlin at the time, and I took one semester off to visit him in Japan and basically, mooch off of him for that time. And I liked it so much that upon graduation from college, I applied to the same program and I stayed for 3 years in Tochigi as well, a different location, but also Tochigi-ken. And, really got into the culture, really got into the language. And when I returned to Atlanta for Georgia Tech for grad school, just staying in Japanese circles, including with the Japan American Society, I was able to come to the attention of JETRO. And that's when I applied for the program, or actually, let me take one step back. While I was in grad school, I served as the assistant to the CNNJ head, or CNN Japan head. I was her assistant for almost a semester. So before JETRO, that was my kind of stint in the real world. And then I transitioned into the Japanese government space thereafter. So the short version is my teaching time in Japan definitely introduced me to Japan, but luckily I have been in the international space and languages and interested in cultures long, long before that. So I guess my whole life has led up to this point in that way.
Oh, as you mentioned, none of us, I don't think, have a straight path or I guess line to connection in the U.S. Japan world. But yeah, from Street Fighter to your kind of love of music and languages, all the way to kind of now, being a top ambassador for the Japanese government. Yeah, more kudos to kind of your path and your journey for sure.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so I know you are very committed to kind of U.S. Japan investment. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what's been happening with Japanese companies during the pandemic? I know JETRO has done a whole lot of kind of surveying research on kind of the impact that COVID-19 has had on Japanese companies. But are you starting to see things kind of improving nowadays? And I know you're well connected with an international community too. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of some things that are happening right now?
Okay, sure. Well, one challenge, of course, for the Japanese corporate community specifically is we've had to pivot quite a bit from the physical world to the digital world. The corporate environment in Japan, of course, or with the Japanese corporate environment in general, is very face-to-face heavy. So the transition for a lot of these companies, including JETRO, has been moving from the boardroom to the virtual environment. And learning to read body language, learning to express ourselves in a way that we've kind of taken for granted prior to this. So I will say that companies have been able to pivot quite easily, which has been quite nice, especially those who are on the business side of things versus, say, a factory side. There are a lot of manufacturers in the Southeast when it comes to the Japanese environment. And the challenge for them, of course, has been physically getting people back to work safely in the COVID environment. So I have seen some challenges there, but they have also been able to add value online via virtual meetings such as this and Zoom and other things. So that's been one plus. One of the big challenges right now, of course, or big questions is the Olympics in Japan. that of course had a ripple effect the first time it was postponed because, there were a lot of companies that we helped that were looking forward to having tourists in Japan to get their products in front of. So if you imagine a company that's building a boutique in Japan, for years prior, in preparation of people arriving, and now being in a position where they can't really recoup a lot of those expenses and it's kind of chaotic, that's definitely been a challenge. And now that travel has been restricted to Japan by the government, uh, even the logistics of preparing for the Olympics now has been a challenge. So those are all, very real challenges, but I would say that um, opportunities have been created too, because it's so much easier to communicate with people who normally would have to fly in, not just from across country, but from an international standpoint. So I'm seeing this in the Japanese market or environment. I'm seeing this in the international community in general. Some organizations and some other companies are used to being in sort of a hybrid environment anyway, where they were doing a lot of virtual before this happened. But in the Japanese sector, it's a little bit different, both in terms of the culture, the language, and just how business practices are in general. So I am seeing pluses and minuses on both sides, but it's promising with the introduction of a vaccine and people being more comfortable getting out and possibly traveling a little closer to home, maybe to Florida or other places. I think that's been able to um, kind of bolster the environment. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I know this past year has been a challenge for all of us, but like you said, there's been some new opportunities. Almost forcing all of us to be able to kind of find new answers and new ways to kind of do business. And I know, I'm sure, like me, you've had a lot of either early mornings or late nights with calls and video conferences with Japan and other, I guess, organizations and companies in different parts of the world. But yeah, so outside of kind of your work at Jetro, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do on your spare time when you're not helping Japan and the U.S. and the rest of the world, I guess, do business with one another?
That's kind of an interesting question. I've always been someone who has um, so many hobbies that I'm definitely never bored. I mean, I don't get a lot of cabin fever being at home. So this is, despite the pandemic, this is really kind of my default environment anyway. At heart, I'm kind of a homebody, even though my schedule tends to be quite full. Um, so in my downtime, so to speak, I typically fill it with investing in myself. So I don't know, I'm sure you can see all of these books behind me. So just as an example, I have a very extensive reading list, and I try to read 2 books per week, which is ambitious, but that gives me a lot of insight to a plethora of subjects within the course of a year. So yeah, reading is definitely one. I can that side. These are all of my language books. So Japanese and then German is on the bottom, and a lot of languages on that shelf. So what I do is I set goals for myself where I prepare as if I'm going to take a Japanese test. So or another test. So I try to meet levels as if I'm a student. That's one way that I get through. As you know, or as I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested in classical piano. So one thing that's happened is I've joined several groups around Atlanta where we kind of are amateurs and we perform for each other from time to time. So many of those have gone online now, one being the Georgia Musical Group, which is also led by a Japanese citizen. And she offers opportunities for people to perform via Zoom, or maybe take a visit or a video of yourself, sorry, and send that in to be posted on our website. So that's another way that I can keep my music going, keep studying going. And I try to avoid Netflix, though I'm watching a little more TV than I normally would. So I try to not have that in my environment, but it's getting harder and harder to ignore great shows that are on TV. if I do watch, I at least try to make sure that they're documentaries or something that adds value so that so I have an excuse for watching it in the first place. So yeah, I mean, things are never dull with me. I have a long list of things that I try to keep myself on track with, but almost all of them are related to enhancing my knowledge about something to some degree.
Very nice. Well, always, I guess, kind of the balance of kind of your life, right? So I love the way
Right.
you have your bookshelf, I guess, organized. The left hand side is for your language, I guess, your soft skills, and the right hand side is maybe
Right.
for your technical skills and your maybe your piano and some other things.
Well,
Right?
oh, by the way, the middle one right here, those are piano books from here to the floor.
Wow.
They're not props, I promise.
Well, we won't ask you to maybe play for us this time, but maybe next time you can maybe showcase some of your piano skills too, right? So,
Sure. Sure.
but yeah, when now kind of going back to kind of your work and stuff, Jetro. So what are the most kind of things that you enjoy the most about Jetro and working for, I guess, Japanese government and some of the challenges as well?
Okay. So I would say, I mean, personally speaking, I've always been very focused on building bridges. So, and that's been from elementary school. I mean, I've been very big on using all of my interests, all of my hobbies, all of my talents to bring people together in one way or another. Whether that's on the social side or the business side. In this case, given everything that's happened, I mean, in the past year, for example, I think if people traveled more, I think if people were more insightful about how they personally affect their environments, then a lot of the ripple effects that we see right now, including things like violence against Asians, all the stuff we saw in 2020, et cetera, all of those things I think would be a little less prevalent right now. So working with the Japanese government allows me to build bridges between two cultures. It allows me to help companies through my own knowledge, but also connecting them to the right people to move forward. Helping American companies or non-Japanese companies to go to Japan and be sensitive to cultures or cross-culturally in both sides. I think that's been very interesting and very helpful. In terms of challenges, in general, I would say the biggest challenge to business between Japan and the US has been the expectations that we have, how people approach, and when I say people, how companies approach the outcomes that are expected. So Americans tend to move very fast in terms of moving from opportunity to how they expect it to end. The Japanese tend to move a little slower in terms of the process of how they get to the outcome, but then once the decisions are made, the implementation is very quick. On the other side, you have the Americans or American business people who move very quickly in terms of here's an opportunity, I like you, let's make it happen. But then if something happens, then everything stops because the groundwork hasn't always been laid. Here come the attorneys because now there's a problem and we really don't have a close relationship. So, that makes business difficult. At the same time, you have the Japanese side that does a lot more on the relationship side so that when things can be implemented, they're implemented quickly. But if there's a problem, then by virtue of our close relationship, we can solve it without teams of attorneys coming in and basically hindering the whole process. So in some respects, I would say it's a mentality issue. In some places, or in some ways, I would say people don't travel enough, so they don't really know what the opportunities are in Japan. Japan is not always on the radar simply because people don't know what's available in Japan. I think a lot of stereotypes keep people from knowing Japanese people in general, but also therefore knowing where the opportunities in Japan might be. So I would say those are the main challenges. I will say though that because of the internet and hopefully this time where everybody can kind of research things for themselves, maybe they'll be a lot more sophisticated and insightful about where the opportunities lie in the future. And also realizing that those opportunities start at a basic human level. I think that will allow us to go leaps and bounds, moving out of the pandemic, but hopefully in the years to come, where we don't see people as just opportunities, but we see them as people first, and then, moving from there.
Great. Well, I know you're kind of right in the middle of the two things you talked about, bridging cultures, but also kind of bridging those two expectations
Right.
between Japanese mentality and the American way of doing things too. So certainly
Hmm.
commend the ongoing and continued work that you do to make that happen, because it's certainly it's not just a one shot and done deal, and it's something that you have to kind of continuously work on, right? So
Yes.
for that all that you do. So as we kind of close out our session, just one more question is that Japan is the third largest economy, and there's I think a lot of opportunities for American companies and companies throughout the world to invest in Japan. But then also Japan is the home of so many different types of products and services, whether it's kind of modern technology related products, or I mean even kind of artisan and very traditional
Hmm.
kind of very kind of artistic things that are made in Japan, that could come to the US and different markets or different parts of the world. So what types of companies, businesses, individuals do you think JETRO's programs and initiatives could be most valuable for? And then how can those people contact you, where they can find more information about JETRO?
Okay. So in terms of opportunities, Japanese companies are holding a lot of capital right now. They have a lot of money to invest, and what they're doing, or at least what we're helping them do, is to find opportunities to invest that money um, outside of Japan. Um, if we're talking about, say, Georgia or even the Southeast in general, um, and Atlanta specifically, the tech industry is very big right now in Atlanta, especially fintech, financial tech companies. Um, Companies that are operating in that space that would want to meet Japanese companies, now is a great time to do that, at least to get on the radar for those companies. Ideally, and startups are great, but ideally, maybe a medium-sized company that is already funded, I think will be a great um, kind of partner for the Japanese companies, only because if it's too early in the stage, it's kind of difficult to connect the dots. But for a company that is already operating and then wants to go into the Japanese market, I think that it's a good time to maybe do a virtual meeting to get in front of companies, almost like a Shark Tank style, maybe. um, Mostly because Japanese companies just don't know much about the Southeast. There's a lot going on here, but it's not really on the radar the way, say, a Silicon Valley or New York would be. So that's one opportunity. Um, Number two, as we know, the aging population in Japan has always been a concern. So companies that are providing solutions to those in the healthcare industry, um, and not always just the medical side, but Japanese elderly are very active. So if you can provide services to them that are a little unorthodox, maybe um, I don't know, like a fitness solution, fitness companies or something like that. Someone who's addressing the aging population in Japan will be great. Um, there's so many opportunities on the agricultural side. We're doing a lot of programs for companies that are interested in sake, or high-end sake, or uh, agricultural products, food, teas, beef. I know the hospitality industry is taking quite a hit during this time, but there's still a lot of opportunities to um, um, hold and market Japanese products in the current environment, like in the local environment. So companies that are interested in getting products from Japan in the agricultural space, I think would find a lot of success now as well. In terms of getting in touch with us, I would first check out the website, JETRO, JETRO .go, as in go, .jp for Japan, just to get a general idea. Companies who are looking to expand in Japan, we have a lot of resources, including the free office space I told you guys about. Companies can use free offices in Japan, and there's 6 locations up to 50 days free of charge. And they invite, or I'm sorry, they offer, translators, interpreting, a full resource library, meeting space, etc. So that would be a great option for companies that are looking to expand a physical footprint in Japan. Secondly, if someone is trying to get in touch with us directly, I would use the email address ama@jetro.go.jp, and that's the Atlanta office. So again, there are many ways that businesses can partner with Japanese companies who are coming to the U.S. and also get plenty of support moving to Japan as things start to unfold and the pandemic moves a little farther away.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So everyone tuning in, definitely reach out to Trevin and his team at Jetro, whether it's through the website or the email that he just gave out, and kind of explore more opportunities. I think it's a great resource, free of charge, right? So, I mean, it's
Yes.
a great way to kind of get into the Japanese market and also kind of find some opportunities to do business and bring a little bit of Japan maybe to our market here. So
I always say, use Jetro to the extent that you can, because as Yoshi just said, things are free, or our services are free. So, exhaust the free services and then move on to the the things you have to pay for. Yeah, so that's my advice.
right, and that's free advice too, right? So
Free advice.
but yeah, so Trevin, so tell us a little bit about your future goals, whether that be professional or personal, and maybe one last message of hope for people tuning in. And we will end our session with kind of maybe a positive note from you.
Well, wow, I try to stay as positive as possible. And as I said, it's all about building bridges. So, even in this pandemic, I try to make sure that I stay connected to as many people as possible. Um, I do what I can, not just in the Japanese community, but, bridging the gap between the Japanese community and other communities to the extent that I can. In terms of the future, you know, personally, I'm trying to get out of hermit mode and move back into the real world a little bit more. I think I'm getting a little too comfortable being, not being in public. So I do need to kind of stop hiding in my books to the extent that I can. Books are great, but I think it's time to join the real world a little bit more. And really just get back on track. I would love to start traveling again. I think that's the biggest piece that I'm missing right now. So I would do that, and really just continuing to use my skills for the common good, not just for myself, but for everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, Trevin. Again, everyone tuning in, visit Jetro's website and reach out to them to kind of learn about all the great things that they do. But thank you again to everyone tuning in, and we will see you next time. So everyone stay healthy, be safe, and we'll check you out at our next event and program. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.